Welcome everyone to Senate Education. Today is Tuesday, April 16th at 1:18. Doing a little preparation for our confirmation hearing on Tuesday, April 23rd. Our hearing of Secretary Saunders, who was appointed Secretary of Education, officially or began yesterday. For those watching and interested, I want to reiterate a couple of things. Number one, the hearing will be in this room. And we will be reserving room, a couple of chairs for Secretary Saunders, family or friends, a couple that are committee assistant. Otherwise, I suspect the rest of the room will be for the press. If people are interested in submitting testimony, please do so. You can send it directly to our committee assistant, Morgan Feldman. And Mr. Feldman's email is mfeldman, correct, at ledge.state.vt.us. You can find it online. And he will be compiling all of the testimony that we've received and make it available to the committee members prior to taking any action on Secretary Saunders. So to prepare a little bit, we do have the Sergeant at Arms in, and we're going to have the Chief of Police in. And he'll stop by at some point. And then we have Secretary Bloomer in. Secretary Bloomer will come in and talk a little bit more about process, a little bit more around background, and a little bit around the various motions that are actually an option that day, and how, if the committee decides to advance the secretary to the full Senate, what that would look like, etc. And just open for general questions. But now we have Ms. Kessler in front of us, our Sergeant at Arms. Hi, Chief. How are you?
Well, thank you.
Good to see you. Please feel free to join us.
Thank you so much.
And Chief, we're just preparing a little bit for Tuesday. We're just talking about Secretary Saunders' hearing. And I think the big thing for everybody watching, and just to reiterate to the two of you, this is where we're going to have the hearing. Very small space. We could get people that want to be in here, but there wouldn't be room for them. We are reserving a couple of chairs for the nominee, his family or friends, and then I suspect we'll have a lot of press in here as well, cameras, that sort of thing. I don't know if people are, those that have been communicating with me, who've been asking, are there opportunities to testify in person? I've made it clear that no, that's the committee's decision to not have people testify in person. However, if they'd like to submit information or any written testimony, they can do so from Morgan Feldman, our committee assistant. And I think really just to give the two of you a heads up that if people do start showing up, we'll leave it to the two of you to help us, if that's okay, deal with any crowd or direction that people might need to receive around not being in the room.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So I'm Kessler, Sergeant at Arms, for the record. So we would handle it in much the same way we would any other issue that raises a lot of awareness and brings people to the building. One of the great parts of the live stream is that people can be engaged with the process without having to enter the committee room. And this is a small committee room, so I think it's wise to have a plan for how you're going to use the seats that day. We have some overflow spaces, so I took a note that the confirmation hearing will happen on April 23rd. And I'm assuming at 1 o'clock or
2 o'clock.
2 o'clock. 2 o'clock. And so what we can do is find some overflow spaces so that members of the public who come to the building, who may or may not realize that they can or cannot get into the room, because that can be a frustrating experience to drive to Montpelier and then not be able to fit in the room. So we will find some spaces, we'll try to find some spaces where they can overflow and still be in the building. And
watch
live stream it.
Live stream.
Exactly. So Problem is there are not very many overflow spaces available in the building, but we will do our best to keep it here on site. And then depending on the crowds, we may have to overflow, into 109 State Street. We have space over there, on permanent reserve. So that's how we would handle any issue that brings a large crowd to the building. If it gets bigger or disorderly, then that's when the Capitol Police would come into play and could help with crowd control or with communication and education about how to be an observer of the hearing, not a participant of the hearing, but an observer of it. So that's kind of just a little bit of background of how we would handle that. We have been receiving calls at the Sergeant at Arms office, as we always do, with issues that raise a lot of awareness. And we've been delivering those messages to legislators as they come in. So that's also another kind of gauge of when we know that there's an issue coming up that raises a lot of awareness, is we'll see the call volume pick up. And so it gives us a little heads up of what to expect for the day.
Senator Weeks.
I'm just curious, 109 State, what is that known as?
I'm sorry, it's the pavilion.
Oh,
The
pavilion.
pavilion building, which is not ideal because you do, when people drive to Montpelier to observe or participate in a legislative hearing, you would expect it to be under the Golden Dome. And part of crowd control and part of giving constituents a good experience when they come to Montpelier is to meet their expectations. And so it's kind of, I would say, frustrating to have to go off site to watch a meeting. You could do that from home. So that would not be ideal to have overflow at the pavilion, but it is a very reasonable solution should we need that kind of space. That's if we exceed what's available here at 115 State Street.
Ms. Kessler, and I think I'm also looking to Morgan on this. Is there a way to advertise that, we're not going to be taking can we do anything more than what we're doing? People might be watching live stream, people might be sharing information with their constituencies, whatever that constituency might be. Is there anything else? And maybe Morgan, you could work with IT to perhaps put something on our page that says, if you're interested in submitting testimony, please feel free to do so.
Yes.
And then anything else from your end?
Well, we could deliver that message when people call the State House. Now we have more information about how you're going to handle the confirmation hearing. We'd be more than happy to share that when people call. We are the main number, 828-2228, and several members actually have that phone number listed as their phone number. So we receive a high volume of phone calls. So that would be an effective way to communicate it.
Does the building itself or the Sergeant of Arms office have any social media presence? Facebook, Twitter, or what are the kids called today? X?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So no, except that the Capitol Police does have a Facebook page, so we could talk about posting something on the Capitol Police Facebook page,
That'd be great.
to get the word out there. I do think it's a great idea, to put something on your agenda, and Morgan has access through the agenda module to hand type some notes, I believe. That, you could put a notation under that 2 o'clock time slot that this is, being held in room 6 with, please submit written comments to, that's a nice indication that this is not a public hearing.
Yeah.
Agendas are set ahead of time and witnesses are listed as a prudent practice to put the public on notice of what's being discussed. So if your name's not on the agenda, the member of the public should assume that they're not speaking. If it was a public hearing, that would be a different story.
And I think it's okay for Morgan, you can actually why don't you post next week's agenda as soon as possible today, just for that Tuesday, 2 o'clock. This is not a public hearing. If you're interested in submitting testimony, please do so.
Absolutely.
Senator Williams, please.
Just a question, Jason Marucci has the governor's website,
Mhm.
and maybe the governor would want to mention you know, if people show up and they can't do what they expected to do, they might not be happy.
Mhm.
So then they're not gonna be interactive. This is not gonna be an interactive Zoom session, so.
Not a bad idea. We'll loop to the governor's office. They're interested in notifying people also. Just very good idea.
Yes.
For their press, it's their press secretary. Thank you. Chief, anything from us that you need? Or we, again, more of a heads up, an opportunity to just talk things through a little bit.
Of course, so I believe our approach should be focusing on what we can control. And then be preemptive in our efforts to make sure that we're getting the word out, through multiple channels. In terms of law enforcement, we've put out a notification to the Intelligence Center. So they will begin to view open source channels and social media to see if there is any indication that it could be a larger than expected turnout in terms of people showing up to the Capitol building. We have notified Montpelier and our surrounding agencies, state police. We've talked to Captain Munson of the state police, and she's really in charge of operations. So she can have additional assets here if we believe posted off-site, if we believe it would escalate to a point where we potentially may need them. So we're going to just work in collaboration with all our partners, keep an open dialogue in terms of our communication with everybody. And again, I think if we are in our approach unified and putting the word out about what type of environment people can expect, then it may act as a deterrent to some degree and letting them post something rather than showing up physically to the state house.
So, and all I'm really just expecting are people that might arrive and be disappointed that they can't testify and having this other options.
Absolutely. And the unintended impression that they're being excluded, which is absolutely not the case. There is a space limitation in the state house, and I can just imagine and anticipate if someone came here expecting that they'd be a part of, at least in the same room as the confirmation, and then there's no space for them in the room, it could send the wrong message, and it's not meant to exclude them. It really is just a space limitation. So the more that those limitations and the expectation can be communicated out ahead of time, Chief always point, people arrive in Montpelier knowing what to expect.
Committee, anything else from either Sergeant of Arms or Chief? Anything from either of you?
No, and certainly it's a fluid situation, so if we learn of anything or anything may come up on your end, keep open communication, come up with an action plan that's effective, keeps everybody safe.
Great. Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Really very much appreciate it. Great.
Thank you. Thank you, Maureen.
So Secretary Bloomer is going to be coming down momentarily, but I thought I asked Beth to, and I have not gone through this, but I asked her to print or to provide us with Title 16 of the Secretary of Education position. Here we go, there's some more. And I think what I was, as I'm preparing, and I know everybody's preparing their own questions, but as we are preparing for Tuesday, but it might be helpful to look at the Secretary's general duties and responsibilities, which are highlighted in the packet. And then a little bit around the position itself and the process. So hopefully that's helpful. The other thing, point of clarification question that was raised by Secretary Bloomer in a meeting this morning was how long, if the secretary is confirmed, how long will she be in office? And I will confirm the email from Ms. St. James, but I believe she would serve until February. At that point, she would either be reappointed by the governor or a similar confirmation process or not be reappointed by the governor. So
And that's directly related to election results.
correct. Generally, agency secretaries, Secretary Bloomer was saying, it's a they're a 2-year position.
Okay.
And I'm gonna pull this up so I can read, but he raised the question in a meeting, in a conversation. Is that true also with the Secretary of Education? And let me just read what Ms. St. James wrote back. So everybody has it. By that point, it would likely have Senate Secretary. Yes.
Seems like he'd be a functional person.
I believe that if appointed, her appointment would likely run through February 2025. And then she would need to be reappointed for March 1, 2025 to February 2027. So again, if confirmed, February 2025, and then she would need to be reappointed for March 1, 2025 to a position that would go until February 27.
So her term is truncated based on when the last Secretary of Education resigned and this process.
No, from, well, yeah, from the time she's beginning to when that term would have ended for Secretary French or, yeah. Or can we check the Secretary? Yes, you can take us offline while we wait.